Hey guys, Steven here today, and today what I wanted to talk to you about is cultivating your spiritual gift, the foundation of a superhuman. Now it's kind of funny because for the longest time I've kind of been holding back on making this video. The reason being is that I just felt like I was not the person to speak on matters like this at all. I don't know. Um, but basically, also, I wanted to make sure that it made sense, right? So it followed with the series and the other videos that I've made so far. Now, it's kind of funny, but if you actually look at it, the way I've kind of laid it out, if you follow it, it's literally like maybe for like my networking people, it's like the OSI model, but building it from a bottoms up approach, right? So first I talk about um, chi or energy, right? What is energy, right? And then I tie that to the body, right? Like um, the body's energies, like the four different um, elements and how they manifest in the body itself, right? And then I talk about like life force and vitality, like your vitality, your life force, right? And then I talk about how all those things are related, right? And then like I kind of like kept moving subsequently, um, going up into now, okay, how do you practically how does this benefit us in a practical way now, right? So you start getting into like meditation, right? Um, how to not only first just become aware of your thoughts has the energy that they are, right? So um, you break down your thoughts, like how every single thought actually is like creating, you can think an energy itself, right? It's like an energy molecule, right? So then you look at thoughts, words, and actions, right? How each of those literally also output energy, right? And then how then I talk about um, the idea of karma, right? Or just um, the golden rule, or uh, having goodwill, right? Having good intent and good intentions, and how that manifests, and how like it empowers you to essentially shape your life, to essentially attract the kind of experiences that you want. Positive experiences by thinking good things, saying good things, and doing good things, or negative experiences by thinking bad things, saying bad things, and doing bad things, right? Then I kind of start um, focusing, trying to like just build that up even more to the point of now, okay, um, just like in math, all right, or just like proof, when you start with a base case, right, it being like life force or energy, and then like that turns into um, or you start with energy, and then that's actually what our life force comprises of, which ties into our body energies, or the four elements, right, which are found in our bodies, which are found, like some people call it chakras or whatever, which ties into like breath, right, which ties into like the way your state of mind is formed, all these things, right. And then I started layering in essentially how that affects even like your brain waves, right? So just going more into like the state of mind things, and how it actually affects your ability to navigate through different events or things that occur in your day-to-day lives, right? Um, and then Let me just make sure that I kind of captured everything. Um, from there on, I essentially just um, start talking about how essentially every single person, every single human being is going through this unraveling of their self experience, or what some people call like self awareness, right? Like this trying or seeking to understand one another, like seeking to maybe become sharper and more controlled, more expressive, more poised, more balanced, if you will, right? And so, how that should lead to having um, supra compassion, empathy, and patience for one another, right? And then going into how, like, um, that essentially should allow you to have a very, very well-rounded worldview or perspective, right? When you see that not only are you having like the same micro experiences, but like on a macro level, like when you look at fucking like literally one continent to another continent on the opposite side of the world, it's literally still the fucking same, and that's like beautiful in and of itself, right? And then like it almost like invites a sense of serenity to everything. And then I kind of talk about how that also should open bridges, right? How it should allow us to um, fully appreciate one another for our differences, because um, just like a puzzle, right? Your piece might help me complement my piece, right? Or your piece complements my piece in one way or the other, right? You might have something that I don't have because of my upbringing, education, background, etc., right? And then I might have something you don't, right? And it's like it essentially fosters or essentially creates a breeding ground for what I dubbed a free, a rich free marketplace of ideas, which is my definition of a conversation. It's like purely just like sharing ideas back and forth. There's no um, right or wrong, right? And then I introduced this idea of a priest that essentially helped me see that insight, how like essentially experience is a double-edged sword, right? And here I'm quoting, and how essentially it's beautiful because you can say something because it's based on what you've experienced, right? But then at the same time, it can be a barrier or a detriment because um, due to maybe our inability to take a step back and gain perspective, we may fail to exercise right humility, which is understanding that no matter what I'm experiencing, you're experiencing something too. And so that enables you to have a different input than mine, right? And then that essentially leads to the fact that that's why we are literally so fucking precious to one another without even realizing it, right? Like that unique perspective is so fucking gold if we just realized it, right? And then I kind of went into um, more on that, and then dealing with like um, the the idea of just right care for yourself will empower you to do right for others, right? So allowing me to step back here, I went into like self-love and self-awareness, how loving yourself fully for everything that you are. You're good and you're bad, right? Like you're angelic and you're demonic, if you will, right? And so by doing that, like allowing love or appreciation for the totality of the essence of the person that you are essentially empowers you to fully activate the God-given talents that you were given at birth, right? And how by fully loving yourself, you're allowing it to express themselves in their totality, right? Now, because, again, if we step back, you all along this development, you had really been um, sharpening yourself and really what some people like religion would call like purifying your mind, right? Like purifying your thoughts, purifying your vessel, right? Purifying ultimately your life force, your vitality. It would essentially make it to where as you're experiencing or you're delving into those like darker sides of your personality or yourself or your being or your energy, um, they will essentially be um, channeled, or it's like you will stay as that good and right steward, right? Just always having a hand over it and not letting yourself not losing your soul to that, right? Because there's a lot of people. It's a tragedy where that happens, right? Like, it's kind of funny, or well, not funny, but it's crazy how like instantly, like, I don't know if y'all remember, but there was this kid a few years back. He essentially started this movement online called the incels, where it's essentially involuntary celibates. But this guy went off. I don't know where he like. I don't know if he like ran into people or shot somewhere, but he was saying essentially that like he hated girls and all this shit, and like he felt like girls were so superficial, blah 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 blah. And essentially, when I saw that, I just knew I was like, damn man, like I see myself in that, right? Like that literally could have been me, just like been in such a state of like despair and frustration, like massive sexual frustration that like but still like an inability to maybe like release it in the way that I'd like to. Right? I fuck a girl would lead me to maybe like not only hate other people, but more tragically hate myself for not being able to meet my needs, right? And so it would manifest in like a mutation of my energy, me becoming toxic to the point of literally acting out that toxicity without any restraint, without any 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 positive intent and intention in mind whatsoever. Right? So when I saw that, I was like, damn, that's literally what that is, right? And kind of just kind of said a prayer, and then I was like, man, at the same time, I just like where that could be me. So I just continuously pray that maybe I don't get like that, because I know how stupid I am, and I know how retarded I can be, and how like despite all this shit, I'm still fucking up like majorly. Like I still just get angry for no reason. It vexes me so much. Like I still say shit I feel like that offends and hurts people, and I never mean to. Like ever, ever. It's like never in my head, but it's like in that moment I just feel some type of way. And even though I may have like radically pure and innocent intents or intentions in mind, I just maybe just blah like a kid. I don't know. It's really vexing to think about it. Um, but so I kind of went into that, and then this will help. Kind of went into more also like just the power of intent and focus, right? How like that literally is like a fucking multi-dimensional energetic laser, right? Shooting out of like your third eye or your mind's eye. That's literally like creating the world. How you can literally just change things around you, right? Um, and then I go into um, that will help with like what I call the art of ghosting, right? Which is just being able to like swing, like avoid pettiness and all that bullshit, and just um, stay chill, right? And then I also went more into like the healthcare side of things, where I talk about like bones, right? Like setting up your life in a way to where even your fucking bones sing like an angelic song, right? Like it's almost like you're so happy inside that it can be felt in every iota of your being, right? And physically that manifests in like your bone density, like you having really strong bones, like to the point where it's actually just um, as we, I don't know if people mention it or not, like it activates this like rejuvenative ability that we have inherently in us, right? Um, and then kind of talk about how like it really ties into just having like a rich life, like a life where you're doing things that make you happy, like it's like what girls call self-care. You're buying the dildo and using it. Like shit, I feel like as guys we don't do that often, right? And so no wonder we're always stressed all the time. Just fap it off, bruh. But I go into that, and there's more on that, and then I tie that in. It helps when I tie in the idea of now, like there comes a point when like I don't know, to I hate, like I feel like I'm Catholic, so like it's like the easiest way for me to relate it. But like in our religion, or in my religion, they call it the I don't know how to say it in English, but in French, c'est l'effusion de l'Esprit Saint, which is kind of like not the confirmation, right? Like when uh, when this the Holy Spirit came down on the apostles, and they started speaking in tongues, they started being able to heal the sick, do all this shit. It's kind of like, or in, for example, if you follow like the chakra models or whatever, they talk about like your crown chakra opening up and the petals starting to like bloom and shit. So that's kind of what that is. And so now what happens is um, there's just so much going on that like you really just have to um, maintain a really keen focus on not letting yourself just fly off the handle, right? Because it's literally at that moment when some people say you're in your prime, right? That's the word. But I like to say it's like it's a key frame in history, right? And so that's when like um, meg- events of like great magnitudes occur, right? Like for example, Hitler occurred at this point, at one of these events, or at one of these moments in time, right? And like the tragedies that follow there, right, was just because like it was over, and then like all these other multi-dimensional historical factors, right? But it's like, or fucking Gandhi, or Nelson Mandela, or like the Wright brothers flying, right? Or touching down on Mars, right? All these, the first UFO contact, like all these different things, um, like new alloys. Anyways, so much, right? But it really just ties into just understanding. It's almost like when girls have periods, right? They're like hypersensitive. In the same way, there are moments in the year when everyone is on that one wave, all one hypersensitivity, and we're just literally like, right? Like some people say, oh no, it happens when the moon is closed, right? So like harvest and all this shit. Other people say, oh no, it's in the summer when it's like heat. So it's like all the different times, really. It's more people are just paying attention to it more than before. Maybe like they're just more aware for one reason or the other. But it's actually constantly happening. And if you actually just instill these like um, awareness process, just hey, become aware of the fact that you have thoughts. Become aware of the fact that words come out your mouth, and you can actually literally um, choose what word comes out. Like, you don't always have to just, even when someone says something really hurtful or mean, you don't have to be offended. You can just, huh, oh, cool story, bro. Anyways, you know. So it's literally choosing your own reality, choosing your own output, right? And that's how you manifest your own dreams. So I kind of tie more into um, the how that plays out on the long term, right? In the spotting video, and I use a lot of like imagery from cartoons, so Naruto, and how like I tie that more, especially with like the different tanks in the body, kind of like when you go running, first tank, second tank, third tank, right? And just what each of these tanks mean, like these different energies, and then how like that ties into the rate of work at which you're operating, right? Um, Went more in depth into that, and then um, tied it back to like how it affects work ethic, right? And how really pushed um, in the video Hustle Like Spec Ops, the emphasis on literally just killing yourself. And that's why I went even harder on this like Dragon Ball Z Goku Super Saiyan swag that I'm all about, where it's like he literally goes into the hyperbolic time chamber to kill himself, knowing that in doing that, he will raise to another level, right? I mean, fucking look at the end of Dragon Ball Z Super. Literally created a fucking universe. Like, holy shit. Anyways, so it's just literally all about just pushing yourself to super extreme conditions and then just maintaining like a ridiculously optimistically positive mindset, which curates swag with your energy in that adversity, right? Then I talk about your cultivating the two hemispheres, right? How essentially, if you think about what I just said, there is almost like two processes going on, right? One is like essentially gathering in information from the outside world. So you're taking in what your senses are giving you, right? And then the other one is like connecting the dots. So it's literally you saying, okay, this piece of data is important and this one is not. This is why, and this is why it's not. Like you being the deciding fact, the thing that controls, the thing that dictates, the thing that gives power to, that gives meaning to, and thus power to, right? And then like you can actually refer to the nature of reality on this. How I talk about the importance of really becoming aware of the objective reality and the subjective. How there is an object objectively that I'm touching right here, but then subjectively, this is called a couch, right? But it could also be called a pillow, right? Or it could be called a pencil. And depending on the way I call it, subjectively literally defines my relationship to that object, because then in my mind I am literally subliminally programming myself to have particular modalities of interaction with that object, right? If I call it a pillow, I would keep trying to lay on it. But if I called it a pencil, I would keep trying to like grab as much of it so I could write it, right? And that's fucking game changer if you think about it, and why I harped on like language, communication, and really having swag phonetics down, because that really changes the world. Like all these issues we're dealing with is literally because someone either didn't say please or thank you, or just didn't hear the person, and then in asking them to repeat, a person thought they were making fun of them. Like, it's literally those things. It's so funny how simple we actually are. So I talk about that, and then I tie. So it's almost like input and then processing, right? And how this occurs in like the two different hemispheres of the brain, right? Some people like to um, approach it from like one is a creative mind, the other one is analytical, right? But then I really focus on like the synergy or like the synergizing of both hemispheres acting together to create a fucking game changer. So I go more into it on that. And then this helps you really, by now, like, have a really, really in-depth understanding of actually how rich you are, how much of a wealth spiritual wealth is, right? Because you doing all this makes you such an incredible person that, like, even in the fucking desert, you could make it rain, right? And if you can do that, you're literally a game changer. Like, and that's my fucking goal, to just not only create game changing assets, but also help foster game changers in the world, right? By leveraging the digital medium so that ultimately you can have a lighter and better place to live in, right? And then, so I essentially focus on how it's all about, and a lot of these concepts, you've most likely heard it from like Buddhism and like other places, right? Simply because for me, it really had a strong and personal um, effect. Like, it really helped me. Like, there were a lot of things I learned in there. Um, the Dharma, like karma, dependent arising, um, mind training, um, uh, body cheetah, like the two wings of a bird, right? Empathy and compassion, right? And there's like levels to it. Like, it just really changed my life because there were a lot of things in Catholicism that we just gloss over, hoping that in allowing the Holy Spirit to take place, it will just take care of itself. Not fully understanding that there is a benefit to having both types of instructions, having not only the theoretical, practical, and then the historical, practical, and then also like the spiritual, practical, which is what they focus more on, and essentially leave out the other two. So that's why we suffer a lot, and I think that's probably why we're dealing with a lot of bullshit and issues in the church. But anyways, so I tie, use a concept called the three treasures, and how it's really all about becoming a well-rounded person, right? Going back to being a game changer, how like you want to be. It's almost like um, taken from a video game. You want to be the Maj, the warrior, the healer, and the ranger, right? You want to be all four as opposed to just being one, right? And how it really just makes you this unique individual. So then that should give you insight into the final video in the series, or the final video before I add this one, which is the mastering solar and lunar energies. Which kind of alludes back to what I was talking about with the whole concept of hypersense moments of just hyperness in the earth itself, and how some people are more aware of it at certain times of the year than others. But I just kind of delve more into that, what it's really about, how it's actually, remember that we are a multi-dimensional energetic system. I always talk about first the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, right? There's like a bit more, but um, people at this moment still cannot, they can barely process what uh, an emotional body would feel like. So I don't think they're even ready to begin fostering the idea of a spiritual, much less an etheric or astral. I think that'd be like dangerous. Don't want people fucking getting yanked out their bodies and then being comatose without being having any reason, any way of going back. But anyways, and then from there I essentially mentioned how it's all about just going back to the simplicity. It's all about energy, right, and life force. And simple, so I always think, imagine like you're like just this light ball, and this light ball literally contains the root essence of everything that is you, right? Like physical based and substance based sciences like to focus on like the material form that is found in this orb, right? So the cells, they talk about the DNA, the macromolecules, right? Or they even talk about the chemical reactions that are occurring in order for this to occur, right? The combustion, which is essentially literally that, if you think about it, just and then it's like it's like what's that? Poppers, you know, the candies you put in your mouth, they go. It's literally that, right? But it's like we are unable to understand what ushered the first, right? Which is kind of funny. But anyway, so but really, it's much more comprehensive than that, and I just keep to the idea of the orb. It's really simple, and then I always refer to Dragon Ball Z, how they fucking like it's like universally acceptably uh, relatable to. So that's kind of just how I always help visualize it, and then um, I say that imagine that there's like um, two primordial forces that go into it, right? There's some people use the word white and black, right? But I prefer like solar and lunar, right? And how like each of those primordial forces have inherent personalities in and of themselves, right? Because they come from actual independent entities, which are there's a lot that we just really have not even begun to focus on. But I feel like we should, but we are not because we're still so dumb or stuck up or have our head in our own asses by the fact that like we either are impeded by the um, the need to be at the center of everything, right? Or the need to um, try, for lack of a better clarity, just try to tie everything back to water. When water isn't really, I mean, there's, my God, you know, there's just so much more out there. And we really have not even scratched the surface. But that's really uh, what I wanted to say about that. It's like solar and lunar energies, they have characteristics, and essentially what weather is a ratio of solar to lunar, right? So rain is essentially a particular ratio, maybe more solar than lunar, or more lunar than solar, but then like there's maybe an extra random element. I don't know. Actually, I'll scratch that and just keep that ratio. I don't know. I'll let you watch the video. It's much cooler that way. Um, and then summer is obviously more solar than lunar. And essentially, I mentioned and talked in the video about how there is such a thing as actually in throughout the series you'll learn that like there is like a natural frequency that the Earth oscillates at, and that's actually our natural rhythm, right? And essentially, what happens is, like, the Earth literally is alive, right? And it breathes just like we do. Sometimes we breathe like really consistent. Sometimes we 3 and 1. Sometimes 1 and 3, 2, 2, right? And so in the same way, those solar and lunar are like ever so changing in the ratio, and that's what creates magnificently different experiences throughout the year, right? From like, oh, there's a lava exploding, to like earthquake, to like tornadoes, to like, I don't know, like species coming out from nowhere, right? To like meteors, to like things being more reactive than like others electromagnetically, right? It's um, like Bermuda Triangle, like actually doing things that it didn't do before. Right? So it's just so many things, right? So that's kind of a blurb on that. And to kind of add something more, because this is a new video to the series, I wanted to talk about how if you understand everything that you've seen up until then, you'll actually have all the requirements to do what I wanted to talk about today, which is really become superhuman. And in my head, my purpose for this video was to essentially, it's like the OS, right? So I'm at that application level of the OSI model. And essentially what that means is it's at that point where this video should help. It's almost like you're installing a controller or an administration program that literally taps into all these processes that are linked to like the most important like foundational processes or parts of yourself or your being, right? So in order to do this, I felt like the simplest way of going about it was to imagine this thing that literally only had maybe 3 buttons, and it was be empathetic, be compassionate, and be humble, right? And the reason why I say that is the foundation of a superhuman is because it's almost like they are the ingredients that empower you to do anything, to be anything, and to literally do, be, and say anything, right? Um, the reason why it's important is because oftentimes when maybe you have like a really unique or authentic thought or idea or word or action, you always feel this internal resistance, right? There's a lot of books that talk about it. Stephen Pressfield, The Art of Resistance, Coming Pro, etc. But they essentially are saying that it's like you become shy, you get shy, right? Some people say it's due to like they refer to it as like social conditioning, right? Like the social dynamics, a lot of things at play, the environment. Essentially, what happens is in order to not look like a fool, you try to act like everyone else, right? Because you're subconsciously led to believe that if you act normal, which is never defined, you will be rewarded, right? You will get what you want. Maybe you will have friends. Maybe you'll get a nice job. Maybe you'll have like cute girls, right? And money and all this shit, right? So essentially, you're like led to believe that normalcy is the way to live, right? Not realizing first that like being normal is never defined objectively, and then 2, it's completely subjective. Meaning, what's normal here is completely different to What's normal here in Round Rock, Texas is radically different than what's normal in Pflugerville, Texas. And that's not even like 10 miles down the road, which is vastly different than what's normal in Austin, Texas, in the North Austin domain, like North Austin domain, Howard region, right? Like, not Howard, but like the domain region. And that's radically different than what's considered normal in the Riverside, like, area of Austin, right? And this is just talking about in the city. What's considered normal here is radically fucking different than what's considered normal in Dallas, Houston, right? And that's literally just cities next to each other. What's fucking considered normal in Texas is radically fucking different than what's considered normal in Norman, Oklahoma. And they're literally neighbors. If that's the fucking case, can you imagine now states away and then, oh, nations away, continents away, worlds away, right? When you realize that, again, you're empowered to just love yourself and just be who you want to be. Not giving a fuck about what anyone says. Because no one knows the right thing to say, to do, or to be. Sure, there are like certain like guidelines, like don't kill people, like don't be like a fucking just asshole, constantly just making people feel like shit, like over and over and over, abusing people, you know, like don't steal, all these things, right? But beyond that, as far as like social behavior, there's no baseline. So that means that you are literally creating the baseline, moment to moment to moment to moment, right? That's why we're radically different than our parents, because it's literally a new day, right? So in talking to our elders, the gift is that we are able to learn what they did, right? We're able to ask, hey, what was it like in your time? And they would say, oh, in my time we did this, right? And we did that. And so in you hearing that, you're able to actually like, it's like it becomes fucking awesome because you can either like put a spin on it, like maybe synthesize it. It's what I like to, when I'm talking to clients or doing any kind of professional work, I actually use the word modernize, right? And that's literally kind of the idea where you're literally taking it from one time period to this time period, this current moment, right? And so you can either do that or you can actually just take it on as a piece adding to your knowledge base of experience, right? Like every single moment that you go through, every single event, whatever that you experience in life, it builds up, you can say there's this like knowledge base within you. Some people use the word data bank, right? And so the more things you go through, the richer this data bank is. And so the cool thing is this becomes useful in situations where you have to make key decisions and there's 100% uncertainty. By having this large repertoire of experiences that you can think, that you can use to ponder for, right? Like almost like having precedents or case studies to look over. If you're like a law student, you're able to actually make you have a higher probability or a higher chance, is my word, of making a favorable and balanced decision. Plus, also, if you've been doing all this self work, most likely the shit you're gonna make is gonna be baller anyways. So, when you realize that, it's like literally every day is a new day, and there's no need to fear who you are. As shitty as things can be, as like grim as the world may look, everything's actually really fucking awesome. Like, the sun is out today. You're not dead. I'm not dead. Like, um, rest in peace to a lot of the people that died. But you're okay, right? On top of that, if you're watching this, you most likely have a multimedia tool of some form, and that means you probably have some form of basic living covered, right? Like a bed, clothes, food, etc. So you're fucking awesome. Like, what I always say is think about the poor starving kids in Africa who don't got shit. I wish they had what you had. So when you're over there complaining about the fact that you don't have money to start your business, or that girl didn't write you back, or your friend's an asshole and he keeps flaking on you, think about the fact that there's 8 quillion plus people on this world, and there are much cooler people than the people giving you shit right now. I can fucking guarantee you that. And so when you know that, there's nothing to worry about. So understanding that, you're only loving yourself as time goes more and more and more, because you're always interested. It's almost like a new excitement comes forward because you don't know what you're gonna do next, right? Especially when you're like the kind of person who's like genuinely coming from a good place, like genuinely trying to be cool, nice, like chill, swag as fuck. Like it's almost like a breath of fresh air, right? So in that, you literally are driven by those things that I mentioned, right? Empathy, compassion, and humility. Reason being, even though you're fully self-expressing, you're not afraid, or you're always quick to say sorry if you feel like you offended anyone, right? And then on top of that, you're always never afraid to take a step back and try to understand what the other person processed or heard by whatever expression that you said. Just taking the time to listen to people is like the coolest fucking thing. And I don't think people understand that enough, right? I feel like people are too entitled. Maybe like they get to a certain level and they feel like they can just say fuck anyone else. That even though, even if they know what the other person is going to say, they can just kind of step on their heads or be disrespectful. Like, and I use the word respect to essentially, how I define it is, you're always wanting, you're always gonna over coddle the person. And how I define cuddle is like, ensure that they know that you are wanting them to not be uncomfortable by you in any way, shape, or form. Like, you're constantly gonna like, hey, I hope this is okay. Like, yeah. Then you will do weird things just to make them feel comfortable. And I actually found like the more and more like maybe you're like successful and like doing really cool shit and at ease with yourself, it's almost like the more and more you almost have to work at making other people comfortable. Because it's like, I don't know, it's weird, but we're really insecure. And it really sucks to say it, but it's shitty how it manifests sometimes. Like, sometimes people just, it's like you're so calm that they don't know how to react, right? It's like what my mentor, what fucking R.D. Tyler said a long time ago. We have lost touch with high conscious energy that we don't even know what it feels like anymore. And so when it's in front of us, we don't even know how to react, right? So like, you're not fidgety, you're like totally still, super beaming eyes, and you're looking right at them, super calm, and like they're literally taken aback because they don't know how to like handle that energy. And so because of that, it's almost like, it's not on you, but I always make it a game on myself to actually just make things fun. Like, how can I make it light today? How can I make someone smile, right? And then in that, it's like really cool expressions come out. New words, right? New ways of being, new ways of saying something. And so it's like just constantly creating. It's like being a multi-dimensional artist, right? So that is essentially how those three things come into play. And the coolest part is, if you have empathy, like, and then even more if you have like humility, because actually I feel like empathy and compassion everyone has, but humility, that's the one that like gets people, because most people aren't humble as much as they'd like to be. It's a pure grace. I've never said that before, and that sounds really weird, but I just don't know how to put it. It's like one of those things where you just know that they really are genuinely being that, right? So, I don't know. Cultivating it, how to cultivate humility. My thing is, how I personally cultivate humility is, anytime I do something wrong, so I have like a standard of behavior, right? For example, one of my standards of behavior is not getting angry and like lashing out at people. Like I said, I have a huge anger problem, right? And like, again, like silly arguments with my mom, right? So, and she's like fucking, like, she's the greatest. And I think it's also awesome to have like really tough parents, because they'll push you to that next level. Like, they'll like, oh yeah, you sell this shit online? Well, let me see you stay chill when I shit talk you to death. While like etherically kick you right in the gonads and cut off your hands. Let me see that smile, like you said in the article. But it's like, she just knows exactly how to get a rise out of me. And so every time I get angry and I start yelling, I get so mad at myself, because I'm like, fuck, here I go again. So then I'm like, I quickly have to apologize. And like, humility is that, like being quick to lowering yourself, right? Being quick to DHV, because it's the right thing to do in and of itself. So that's how I literally exercise it, and I think it fructifies the soul. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but if you do this, you will see changes, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For the other two, I've kind of spoken about it in the other videos, so I'll just let you harp on that, because I think my biggest, I guess, the side purpose for this video was like speak on humility, because I feel like if we were all more humble, even by 1%, my God, like, can you imagine just how much more sex we'd all be having? One can only dream. Anyways, this was all quite a mouthful. Hope you guys get something out of this. And as always, swag the fuck out.
Let's make this fleeting moment last forever.